was a cold, rainy afternoon when Ava's shift at the small roadside diner was about to end. The day had dragged on, like most others, with half-empty coffee cups and tired conversations. She wiped down the counter, glancing at the clock, her fingers aching from the long hours. Just as she was about to untie her apron, the loud rumble of an engine broke the quiet hum of the place. Outside, a sleek black SUV rolled up, its glossy frame out of place among the rusted pickup trucks and dusty sit-ins parked nearby. Moments later, the door creaked open and in stepped a tall man, dressed in a rain-soaked designer coat and leather shoes that clearly didn't belong in a town like this. His name was Julian. To the world, he was a billionaire tech investor, always in the headlines, always ahead of the game. But today, he wasn't here for business or press. His luxury SUV had broken down just a mile outside town, and his phone had died somewhere along the way. The diner was the first place with lights on, so he'd walked in, hoping for some help, though he clearly didn't expect to find any. Ava noticed the frustration on his face, but greeted him with the same warm smile she gave everyone. "Rough day?" she asked, setting down a mug of hot coffee in front of him. He barely nodded, his eyes scanning the place like he couldn't wait to leave. But something about Ava's calmness made him pause. When she offered to help take a look at his car, saying her brother used to be a mechanic, Julian was too desperate to say no. Outside in the rain, Ava rolled up her sleeves and got to work. Julian stood nearby, watching her with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Who was this girl? Why was she helping a complete stranger in the pouring rain with nothing to gain? Then, just as Ava leaned over the open hood, her coat sleeve slid up, and that's when Julian saw it. A bracelet. A simple silver chain with a tiny charm. His breath caught. He recognized it immediately. It was the exact same bracelet he'd given someone long ago, someone he'd spent years trying to forget, but never could. And now it was right there, on the wrist of a waitress in a nowhere town, helping him fix his car in the rain. But how did she have it? Who was she, really? Julian's heart pounded as 100 questions raced through his mind, but he stayed silent, watching, waiting. He needed answers. And Ava had no idea what was coming next. Julian stood frozen as the rain tapped lightly on his shoulders, his mind stuck on that bracelet. He hadn't seen it in over a decade, yet he could never forget it. It had belonged to Emily, his first love, the girl who'd vanished from his life without a trace when he was just starting to build his empire. That tiny silver charm was a birthday gift he'd saved up for, back when all he had were dreams and a second-hand bicycle. Seeing it now on this young woman's wrist stirred something deep inside him. Was this just a coincidence, or something more? Ava wiped her hands on a towel, completely unaware of the storm she'd just stirred in him. "I think your battery's the issue. You'll need a jump," she said, her voice casual. "Give me a second. I've got cables inside." Julian nodded slowly, his eyes still locked on her wrist as she disappeared back into the diner. His thoughts raced. Emily would be older now. Ava didn't look more than 24, 25 at most. Could she be? No, it couldn't be. But what if? Back inside, Ava quickly grabbed the jumper cables from under the counter, not noticing the way Julian was watching her now, not with irritation or impatience, but with something quieter. Curious, conflicted, almost haunted. Ava had grown used to people overlooking her. Customers came and went, barely noticing her beyond their orders. She never minded much. Life had been hard, and she'd learned early not to expect too much. Her mother had passed away when she was 10, and the man she was told was her father was never really in the picture. She bounced through relatives, shelters, and eventually the foster system, before aging out and finding her own way. The bracelet was one of the only things she had from her mom. She never took it off. Outside again, Ava clipped the cables to the battery, then glanced up. "You okay?" she asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Julian blinked, caught off guard. "I just didn't expect to find help out here," he replied, carefully choosing his words. "Well," she shrugged, "people still help each other, even if the world forgets how." Her words hit him harder than they should have. Julian wasn't used to kindness without a price tag. Everything in his world came with conditions, contracts, NDAs, investments. But Ava had just helped him, no questions asked. Still, he couldn't shake the image of the bracelet. He had to know where she got it, who gave it to her. But if he asked too soon, he might scare her off, or worse, lose the one clue that could lead him back to the past he'd buried. So instead, he stayed quiet, for now, watching, wondering. And slowly, the pieces of a forgotten story began to stir back to life. Julian followed Ava back inside the diner, the jumper cables now resting in the back of his SUV. The engine had roared to life, but something inside him still felt stuck, caught in a loop of memories he'd tried to forget. He took a seat near the window, pretending to scroll through his dead phone, while Ava returned to her routine behind the counter like nothing unusual had happened. But everything felt unusual now. He couldn't stop staring at the bracelet, and each glance brought back images he thought were long gone. Emily's laugh, her wild ideas, the way she used to believe in him when no one else did. And then just one day, gone. No goodbye, no explanation. Only the silence that followed him for years. Ava poured fresh coffee into his mug. "You're lucky it wasn't something worse," she said. "Most folks don't get this far out without trouble." Julian smiled faintly. "I guess I got lucky." He wanted to ask, where did she get the bracelet? Had her mother given it to her? Was her mother Emily? But something stopped him. What if he was wrong? What if he opened a door he wasn't ready to walk through? Outside, the rain had lightened into a steady drizzle. Inside, the diner remained quiet. Just one older couple in the corner booth, and the hum of an old jukebox playing a soft tune from decades ago. Julian's eyes scanned the space, then landed on a photo hanging behind the register, a black and white picture of a young woman holding a baby. He squinted. The woman looked vaguely familiar. "Is that your mom?" he asked casually. Ava turned, nodding. "Yeah, she used to work here too, back in the day. I never really knew her, though. She passed when I was a kid." Julian leaned forward slightly, heart picking up. What was her name? Emily. Emily Hart. His chest tightened. The name confirmed it. Ava looked up, sensing something in his silence. "Why do you ask?" Julian hesitated. He wasn't ready to answer. "Not yet. Just reminded me of someone," he said, covering quickly. Ava offered a small, polite smile, then turned to refill the salt shakers. Julian sat there, staring at the photo. The resemblance was there, the eyes, the shape of her face. The timeline even matched. But if Ava was Emily's daughter, that meat. He didn't finish the thought. Instead, he stood slowly, walked to the door, then paused. He had to know more, but it couldn't come all at once. Behind him, Ava called out, "You heading back to the city?" He turned, his voice even. "Not yet. I think I'll stay in town a while." She nodded, unaware of the storm she had just pulled him into. And Julian had no idea just how much of his past this small town was about to uncover. Julian checked into the only motel in town that evening, his mind too restless to drive back to the city. The bracelet, the name, the photo, it all pointed to something he wasn't ready to face, but couldn't walk away from. He kept picturing Emily's face in that photo, holding Ava as a baby. Could it really be? Could Ava be his daughter? That night, sleep didn't come. He sat by the window, staring into the quiet street, the neon motel sign flickering like a heartbeat. Questions swirled in his head. Why had Emily left? Why hadn't she told him? And if Ava was truly his child, why had no one ever reached out? Back at the diner the next morning, Ava showed up early like always, her hair tied back and a fresh pot of coffee already brewing before the sun rose. She didn't expect to see Julian walk in again. "You're still here?" she asked with a slight laugh. "Yeah," he said, trying to sound casual. "Figured I'd stay a little longer. Place kind of grows on you." Ava raised a brow. Most people say that after staying a week, not half a day. Julian smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Maybe I'm just tired of rushing everywhere." She poured him a cup, sliding it across the counter. "Well, if you're looking to kill time, there's not much here. A few shops, the lake and stories no one tells anymore." That caught his attention. "What kind of stories?" She shrugged. "Town stuff. People who vanished. Secrets nobody talks about. My mom was one of those stories." He leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Ava paused, her hands tightening slightly around the coffee pot. "I never really knew what happened to her. She died when I was 6. Car accident. But some folks say she was hiding something. That she came here out of nowhere, changed her name. Never spoke about her past." Julian's heart pounded. It was her. It had to be. He tried to stay calm. "Did she ever mention anyone? A man she cared about?" "Not to me," Ava said softly. "But once when I was little, I remember her crying while holding that bracelet. She said something like, he would have stayed if he knew. That always stuck with me." Julian's throat went dry. He looked down at his hands, shaking just slightly. So many pieces were falling into place, but the full picture was still missing. He needed proof. He needed to know for sure. And Ava, she was starting to notice that this stranger might not be who he claimed to be. But neither of them were ready for the truth waiting just around the corner. Julian stepped out of the diner later that morning, the crisp air brushing against his face, as if to wake him from the tangled thoughts flooding his mind. He walked slowly through town, past cracked sidewalks and shuttered stores, trying to piece together what to do next. Every word Ava had said echoed in his head. Asterisk, he would have stayed if he knew. Asterisk, the guilt was already heavy. But what gnawed at him more was the question. Why hadn't Emily told him? As he passed the town library, something in the window caught his eye. A faded newspaper clipping pinned to the community board inside. Julian stepped closer. The headline was barely legible through the glass. Asterisk, local woman dies in crash. Leaves behind 6-year-old daughter. Asterisk, his stomach turned as he realized it was about Emily. But what made his pulse quicken was the name listed at the bottom of the article. Asterisk Emily Hart, formerly Emily Carter Asterisk. Carter. That was her real last name. He stepped inside, the bell above the door ringing faintly, and approached the counter. The librarian, a quiet woman in her 60s, looked up. "Can I help you?" Julian nodded. "Do you have any archives? I'm looking for old town records." She motioned toward the back room. "Help yourself. Been years since anyone cared." He spent the next hour flipping through dusty boxes until he found something that made him freeze. A school enrollment form for a first grader. The emergency contact listed was not Emily. It was a man named Harold Green. Address listed just outside of town. Julian's fingers tightened on the page. He'd heard that name before. Back at the motel, he opened his laptop and searched through public records until it hit him. Harold Green wasn't just some guardian. He was a former business partner of Julian's, from way back in the early startup days. They had a falling out over stolen ideas, and Julian had cut ties fast, never looking back. Now he was listed as Ava's emergency contact. Julian's thoughts spiraled. Had Harold known? Was he the reason Emily had disappeared? Had he kept them apart on purpose? The timing made too much sense. Julian's heart raced as he realized the depth of the betrayal. This wasn't just about finding out he might have a daughter. It was about uncovering a lie that had shaped both of their lives. If Harold had truly stepped in to raise Ava, what had he told her? What had he hidden? Julian looked out the window, anger and fear swirling together. Ava had no idea about any of this. And Harold? He still lived just a few miles away. The truth wasn't just buried. It had been buried on purpose. Julian drove down the narrow road just outside of town, tires crunching over gravel, his grip tight on the steering wheel. The old farmhouse at the end of the lane hadn't changed in years. He remembered it now. Harold's family property, the place they used to meet back when everything was still simple. He parked, stepped out, and walked toward the porch, heart pounding with every step. There were no more guesses, no more waiting. He needed the truth, now. Harold answered the door after a long pause, eyes widening in disbelief. Julian. He said, voice tense. What are you doing here? You know why I'm here, Julian said. Ava, Emily, don't lie to me. Harold's face tightened, his jaw working like he was trying to hold something back. Then with a heavy breath, he stepped aside. You'd better come in. Inside, the house smelled faintly of old wood and coffee. Papers were scattered across a cluttered desk, and on the wall, Julian spotted a photo. Ava, maybe 12 or 13, smiling beside Harold. You knew she was mine, Julian said, not asking, stating. Harold sat down slowly. Emily didn't want to tell you. She was scared. Said your world was too dangerous. She left to protect Ava. I helped her start over. Julian's voice was low, sharp. You helped her. Or you wanted her to disappear. Harold didn't answer at first. Then he looked up, his eyes hard. You were building your empire. You had no time for a child. She made her choice, and when she died, I did what I had to. Ava needed someone. Julian's hands balled into fists, but he held back. The truth burned. All this time, he could have been there. He could have raised his daughter, but Harold had taken that from him. You had no right, Julian said through clenched teeth. She's better off not knowing, Harold muttered. You come in here now, thinking what? That she'll forgive you. That you can fix what's been broken for years. Julian stepped closer. That's not your decision. Later that day, back at the diner, Julian found Ava cleaning the tables. He looked exhausted, but more certain than ever. I need to tell you something, he said quietly. Ava looked up, sensing the weight behind his words. But before he could speak, a voice interrupted them from the doorway. I think I'll be the one to explain, said a woman's voice. Julian turned and froze. Standing there, alive and very real, was Emily. Older, paler, but unmistakably her. Ava gasped, staring at the woman she thought she'd lost forever. Emily looked at both of them, eyes glassy. There's a lot you both don't know, she said. But it's time you finally did. Julian couldn't move. His breath caught as he stared at the woman he once loved, the one he thought was gone forever. Ava stood between them, confused and overwhelmed, her eyes darting from Julian to the woman who'd just walked in. Mom, she whispered, her voice trembling. Emily stepped forward slowly, her hands shaking. I'm so sorry, she said. I never meant for it to go this far. Julian finally found his voice. You're alive. They said you died. I almost did, she replied, her eyes never leaving his. After the accident, I was in a coma for weeks. When I woke up, they told me Ava had been placed in Harold's care. And he told me you'd moved on, that you didn't want anything to do with us. Julian's chest tightened. That's not true. I never knew. I thought you left without a word. Emily's face crumpled. I wanted to find you. But Harold controlled everything. He had power in this town, and he used it. By the time I was strong enough to leave, Ava was already calling him Dad. I didn't want to confuse her. I stayed away, thinking maybe that was best. Ava took a shaky breath. So all this time, both of you thought the other didn't care. Julian looked at her, his voice low. If I'd known about you, even for a second, I would have done anything to be in your life. Emily nodded. And I should have fought harder. I thought I was protecting you both. But I see now I was just afraid. A long silence fell between them. The truth was finally out, and all the years of hurt were hanging heavy in the room. Ava's eyes welled up as she looked at both of them. So what now? She asked softly. Julian stepped closer. Now we take it one day at a time. No more lies. No more lost years. Emily wiped her tears, a small, hopeful smile on her lips. I'd like that. Ava nodded, still processing, but something in her expression had softened. She looked down at the bracelet on her wrist, the piece that unknowingly brought them all back together. In the days that followed, the town that had once hidden so much slowly began to feel like home again. Secrets that had been buried for years finally came to light. And though healing would take time, the path forward was no longer hidden. Julian stayed, not as a billionaire passing through, but as a father trying to make things right. Ava, once just a waitress in a forgotten town, now had a story of her own, one of strength, truth, and reunion. And for the first time in a long time, they all had something they thought they'd lost forever, each other.